Good evening, everyone. I am Chris, and I am here. This isn't Chris Reviews. This is Chris Rants. I've ranted before on the channel, but I wanted to make it official with this one. I am pretty much fresh out of the cinema from Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the fifth installment in the Indiana Jones franchise, directed by James Mangold, produced by Kathleen Kennedy. I'm going to need some help for this one. I don't have a plan for this. I really don't. I realize I'm a little bit late to the on joining the stream. This was scheduled for midnight. It's almost like 10 past just gone. Yeah, I'm going to need some help. So I was actually tempted at the cinema to buy the sippy cup. There's a Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny themed drinks cup, which is incredibly overpriced. You get a little Indiana Jones fedora on top of the cup, and you get a little straw. And I was going to buy it to drink this from. And then Odeon Cinemas were charging £9.99 just for this cup. And as much as I wanted it to be aesthetically pleasing to the camera, I didn't want to fork out $9.99 on this. JX says, so how was it? It wasn't good. It really wasn't good. And here's the thing, right? Am I going to be ranting on this? Probably. Do I need to keep my voice relatively low because it's midnight and there's people living next door? Probably. I don't know how heated I'm going to be on this because, to be honest, going into this film and, hearing all the reviews about it, hearing a lot of this was leaked ahead of time. And I bought into all the leaks and I watched and listened to pretty much everything I could on this film. So there were really no surprises with this film for me. Jake says, how was the lighting? Pretty fucking bad. I'm going to talk about that because that's actually one of my biggest negatives in the film is the lighting. It's terrible. From when it's overly dark to when it's garishly digitally bright. But I knew pretty much everything that was going to happen in this film before going in. I really didn't care about spoilers and stuff like that. And I kind of wanted to know what I was getting in for before going into it. And I was just filled with a complete sense of apathy. And in all fairness, this wasn't Dial of Destiny. I'm going to point the finger here at Steven Spielberg and George Lucas himself for the atrocities that we witnessed in 2008 with Indiana Jones and with the Crystal Skull, which to this day, there are probably worse films, worse made films, worse written maybe. The film that absolutely gutted me, that was my Phantom Menace. A lot of people who grew up with the Star Wars original trilogy will always say that, when they went into Phantom Menace, they were absolutely gutted by it and it ruined Star Wars for them and everything like that. I grew up with Phantom Menace, so I never really had that extra reaction to the Star Wars prequels like I know a lot of old. I got that with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That film absolutely gutted me. I was almost inconsolable. I still have the DVD collection right here. The Adventures of Indiana Jones, the complete DVD movie collection. It says it on there, the complete. And what is complete? We've got Raiders. Hang on. We've got Raiders, Temple of Doom, got Last Crusade, got a goddamn bonus disc. Hey, if it's good enough for the DVD cover, Complete Adventures, as far as I'm going, because there are 3 Indiana Jones films, no more, no less. So this franchise was a done deal. This franchise was dead to me. My headcanon, pretty much like I have with the Star Wars sequel trilogy, actually. I've blanked them from my mind. They don't exist to me. There is a clear, definitive ending with Star Wars to me, as well as Indiana Jones, 3 Indiana Jones movies. So this one wasn't so much... beating a dead horse. This was the horse has decayed since for the last however many years, 15 years. The horse is gone. The horse is pulp, and Disney are just kind of scooping it up and fashioning it into some kind of shape and putting it out in movie theaters. JX says, "What's the edit going to be like?" I was thinking that throughout. First and foremost, I need to hack this runtime down. This is 154 minutes. No Indiana Jones film needs to be that long. You can get in and out in a neat 2 hours. You don't have to reinvent the wheel with Indiana Jones. You don't have to make it needlessly complicated or convoluted. And that's kind of what Kingdom of the Crystal Skull did back in 2008. And this follows suit pretty much. A lot of this was quite a troubled production by the looks of it. Just reading a bit about it, Steven Spielberg was originally on board to direct. George Lucas's involvement was kind of up in the air. I get the impression they probably didn't want him around, maybe. George Lucas's ideas, this is actually, it's kind of interesting because from what we hear a lot about with George Lucas is he always wants to do something new. He always if he's going to come back to a franchise, he always wants to push it in a new direction, and he wants to do stuff that he hasn't done before. And I can appreciate that. And you can definitely see that with his films and certainly his ideas for films, which, for better or worse, never came to fruition, namely the Star Wars sequels. But if you look at the prequels, the Star Wars prequels, wildly different from the original trilogy, right? It's much more lore focused. We get these new visuals that feel like very different films in a brand new world. We're seeing new planets, new vehicles, new alien races, everything, and the story structure is different, and it feels vastly different. And that's why if you don't like them, I completely understand it. They are very much divorced in terms of visual style from the OT, but they do have an identity of their own. And when you hear what George Lucas's ideas were for the sequel trilogy, and it seems like he had a lot of ideas for the sequel trilogy, so I don't know which one is actually verbatim. There's reports out there that he was going to have Darth Maul returning as the main villain for the sequel trilogy, and was going to have Darth Talon. I'm not too keen on some of those ideas. And then you get other ideas that you hear how he wanted to make it like this microscopic world of the midichlorians and the Wills, and he wanted to go really like cosmological with it and stuff like that. And is that inherently what Star Wars is? Would it have been good? I don't know, maybe, but would it be different? Would it have an identity of its own? And is it pushing it in a bold new direction that hasn't been done? Yeah. And I get that impression that he probably had something like an idea similar to that with Indiana Jones 5, and for worse, we saw that with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. What I do appreciate about George Lucas, though, and Steven Spielberg as well to some regard, is that especially with the Indiana Jones films, they were much influenced by the adventure serials that they grew up with. And you can see the fingerprints of a lot of similar shots and a lot of similar set pieces and archetypes throughout, all of the Indiana Jones films. So, well, the main trilogy, namely. Now, when we got to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in 2008, George Lucas, they were looking at it's been 20 years on, and they've got to modernize it in terms of the narrative of Indiana Jones. You can't have Nazis anymore. We're in the 50s. And what's around the 50s? Okay, we've got Russians. Fair enough. But also from that decade, George Lucas started looking at a lot of the sci-fi films that came out at the time, or Attack of the Mutant Aliens or Attack of the Giant Ants or whatever. And, those monster movies, the monster and sci-fi movies that came out in the 50s that were rife, the B movies. And he said he wanted Indiana Jones to be that. And that fundamentally was one of the main issues of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, is that Indiana Jones wasn't it wasn't a 50s B movie. It never was. It was never anything to do with sci-fi in terms of aliens and UFOs. It was never like, it was originally going to be called Indiana Jones and the Saucer Men from Mars, or Indiana Jones and the Killer Ants, or something like that. Those were genuine working titles that George Lucas came up with. And you can see what he's doing there, and you can see what he's influenced by, but that fundamentally isn't Indiana Jones. So apparently his idea for an Indy 5 was bold. And if we're getting bolder than UFOs and interdimensional beings, then Christ knows what he came up with. But one thing that is very interesting, and this is a quote from George Lucas, this is pulled from Wikipedia. Lucas stressed the importance of having a MacGuffin that is supernatural but still grounded in reality with an archaeological or historical background, saying, quote, "You can't just make something up like a time machine." Which brings us very nicely to Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, where the MacGuffin is a time machine. I don't even know where to start with this thing. I was actually just going to go beat for beat through this thing. That's probably going to be the easiest way to go about this. If I'm going to just give any, I mean, if you guys don't want anything spoiled, and some of you will probably tune out right now, I'll just give 2 cents on it. This, if you're going to ask me which is worse, this or Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I actually don't have an answer for you. I think I'd probably have to go back and watch Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This, apart from the ridiculous, awful time traveling mechanic, this feels slightly more grounded than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So I'll give it that. There's no UFOs in this. There's no interdimensional beings, but there is time travel, and that's ridiculous in and of itself, even for an Indiana Jones movie. So I guess you pick your poison. But I'd have to go back and watch Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which is something I have no intention of ever doing. It just feels so tired. It lacks the energy, it lacks the pace, the excitement, the thrills that you expect from an Indiana Jones film. Part of that is down to Harrison Ford being, I think he's 80 now, isn't he? So he'd probably been 79, but yeah, he would have been 79 filming of this. A lot of it's down to that. He felt old to play the character in Kingdom of the Crystal. He feels way too old to play the character now, at least convincingly. Is there a sense of nostalgia where you see him in the jacket and with the whip and the fedora? Maybe, but as I say, this is a tired franchise, and to me, this completes the trifecta of failure from Kathleen Kennedy. This film completely ran the Star Wars franchise into the ground. That is a dead franchise now. Just filled with complete apathy and just ruined the story. I actually wonder if this is some kind of personal retribution to her, because she was a producer back in the days of these movies, and I'm wondering if she's kind of getting back at the system a little bit, or she was a woman in a man's world, and she's trying to dismantle these creations from the likes of Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, and putting her own stamp on it and her own agenda and politics into it, and just completely tearing down these strong masculine archetypal characters, and introducing a self-insert character in the form of Rey, or in the form of Admiral, or in the form of Phoebe Waller-Bridge in this movie. Because the worst thing in this film, the CGI is pretty bad. I'll get onto that later. But the worst thing in this movie is the character who's easily fronted the most. That is Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Now, I must admit, I haven't seen Phoebe Waller-Bridge in anything. I know a lot of people talk about Fleabag. I don't know if there's a comedy series or something. I don't know if it's big in the States. I'm not sure. I've never watched it. I've never really seen her in anything, so I can't comment on anything she's done outside of this movie. But I do know what her stamp has been included on, and what her input has been put on, namely the final James Bond movie, No Time to Die, which is a very ironic title for that film, because, spoiler alert for No Time to Die, they kill off James Bond. A lot of the Daniel Craig era is basically just cooking Bond, C-U-C-K, cooking Bond all the way through, to the point where he was just a weak, kind of emasculated, wimpy character, bearing none of the traits and the strong masculine qualities that we'd seen in the previous films, or the previous incarnations of James Bond. He was a Bond for the modern age, which means he had to die, and we had to just literally nuke that toxic masculinity that is James Bond. Another one of the biggest male cinematic characters and most enduring characters of all time being off. And yeah, I know people are going to say, oh well, he's going to come back. That's not the point. Bond never dies. That's the whole essence. That's the whole crux of the character. And as I believe Daniel Craig wanted that because he hated playing the character. He was just filled with self-loathing playing that character, but also a lot of rewrites from Phoebe Waller-Bridge. A lot of comparisons with where we find Indiana Jones's character in this is very much akin to Han Solo from the Star Wars sequel trilogy, which isn't a glowing report at all. He is kind of given up on life. He's an alcoholic. His marriage is broken down, it's interesting. So there's no Mutt Williams in this. There is no Shia LaBeouf in this. Partly that's down to the fact that Shia LaBeouf is an absolute maniac. I haven't drank, by the way. To the death of Indiana Jones. That's partly down to the fact that Shia LaBeouf is insane in real life. But also, I genuinely think it's a mainstay from Kathleen Kennedy that we can't just have like a good father-son relationship in any of the films that she makes. Clearly, that would be too much testosterone for a movie for her. So, yeah, Mutt Williams is dead. Shia LaBeouf's character is dead. We find out later in the movie he enlisted in Vietnam and died. That's it. So we get almost that passing of the torch moment at the end of Indy 4. And I think that was probably going to play into the next one. If George Lucas and Steven Spielberg had have made it, they would have probably have pushed more to have Shia LaBeouf take up the mantle after that film. But no, he's dead. Died in Vietnam. And as a result, from the grief and not being able to come to terms with it, and Indiana Jones just throwing himself into his work and going back to what he does, his marriage breaks down and he's divorced from Marion. So that happy wedding matrimony at the end of the fourth film, yeah, it's broken down and he's miserable and he's living in like a one-bedroom apartment and he's just whiling his way, just drinking, being miserable. He's coming up to retirement, and in fact, he does retire. It's implied that it's kind of a forced retirement from the college, the university that he works at. So he's just kind of an old man with no course in life. He's got nothing to live for. He's got no marriage. He hasn't got a child anymore. And he's got no job, so he's just kind of, and he's aging, so he can't go back on the adventures, to get one last thrill ride. So we get a washed up, miserable, hobo-like character. I'm going through the film now. We're going to break it down bit by bit. That makes 2 cents, but we're going to go into it now. So I'm looking at the Wikipedia article here as a reference, but I'm just going to kind of breeze. So usually with the Indiana Jones film, a nice sort of cold opening, right? Maybe akin to the Bond films. And I think you can draw a lot of comparisons to Indiana Jones to the James Bond films. They're a very similar character. Peak masculinity, a bit of a womanizer. They're an adventurer. They save the day at the end, and they kick-ass. They're a great paragon character. And like Bond, you don't want to see an old Bond. A lot of people complain Roger Moore in A View to a Kill. I love A View to a Kill. It's one of my favorite Bond movies. But I'll admit, Roger Moore was way too old character in that film. I still get a kick out of seeing him in the film, but it's a little bit uncomfortable when he gets with the Bond girl in the end. It's the same with this one. Indiana Jones isn't really a character. And what I mean by that is that he is an archetype. He is more the sum of his parts rather than a character. He's the hat. He's the whip. He's the jacket. He's the swashbuckler. He's the adventurer. That's what he is. I don't really go into an Indiana Jones film wanting sort of like a deep dive character study on a Jones. He fits the role. And he saves the day and we go on an adventure with him. He's a likable character, sure. He's a fun character. He's a kick-ass character. But you don't really want to break him down and study him and just witness him in this sorry state. And, Bond, you don't want an 80-year-old Bond in a movie because a lot of the surrounding elements for the character will fall to the wayside. Oh, he won't be able to keep up with the action as much now. He won't be the womanizer anymore because he's an old man, and that would be weird if if Indiana Jones was flirting with Phoebe Waller-Bridge in this movie. Number one, God help him, but number two, it'd just be a bit it'd be a bit uncomfortable. You want to see these characters in their prime, and Harrison Ford ain't going to take it away from him. Looks fantastic for 80, and I can only hope that I look as good as if I'm lucky enough to hit. But he doesn't fit the bill. with this. Do you know what it is? And this will take me into the beginning of the film now. So the beginning of this film reminds me of The Irishman, Martin Scorsese, and there's that very infamous clip of Robert De Niro's character. He's de-aged and he's meant to be a young spry man. He's meant to be like the Robert De Niro from his, and he's kicking this guy in the street. He throws him out of a window and he's like stomping this guy, and he looks like an old man because he is an old man. And they've just digitally de-aged the face, and he's moving and he's throwing these punches and he's stomping, and it looks like an 80-year-old man trying to fight. That's kind of what I got from the beginning of the film. So our cold open of this one kind of falls into the same pitfalls as Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, in that it's very verbose, it's very convoluted, and it's throwing a lot of information at us all at once, and it's very meandering, and it's kind of all over the place. It's introducing a lot of characters and this and that. And that's really not what an Indiana Jones cold opener should be. If you look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, you have that great, almost like a spaghetti western build up to Indiana. He's in the shadow. You'll see the side of the face. You'll see him crack the whip, and then he's out of the shadows. It's Indiana Jones, and then you have the whole very famous scene now with the idol and the boulder and everything. And then we go into the adventure from there. Temple of Doom opens, again, the Bond comparison, opens very much like a Bond film. It opens with like a big elaborate dance number. We're in Shanghai. Bond emerges like a Bond-like character in the white tuxedo. We get a great out. We get a chase through the Shanghai. We have the plane jump, with the rubber raft. And then I think probably when they get to the Indian village, that's when the actual adventure starts properly after that. And Last Crusade has a great one as well. You have the flashback to the young Indiana Jones, sort of like the origin point for that, which I always thought was really cool. I thought that was a really good opener there. Kingdom of the Skull just went straight in immediately. And, we're introduced to Area 51. The Crystal Skull right from the beginning, the villain right from the beginning, and the stakes and it felt too good. You also have the very perplexing opener with the drag race down the street to Elvis Presley's Hound, the CGI prairie dogs, and it was very much George Lucas with American Graffiti. You can definitely see his fingerprints all over that, and that he was happy to be back in the 50s, but it didn't quite feel right for Indiana Jones. In this one, we open in 1944. It's the Allied liberation of Europe during World War II. And we have digitally de-aged Indiana Jones. He's dressed as a Nazi officer, but he's been apprehended. It's kind of similar, I guess, to, again, the beginning of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where we find Indy has already been captured. Indy has apparently been attempting to try and retrieve the spear that stabbed Christ during the crucifixion. That's initially what he's going after. But during this you're introduced to Mikkelsen's character, who's playing generic German bad guy. Like he pretty much every single role he's ever made as a villain. Now, Mikkelsen is a great actor. He's a very serviceable actor, but he's almost like the Mark Strong now. It's like, we need him for this movie. Get Mads Mikkelsen. He'll do a bang up. He'll be serviceable as a villain, but all of his villain characters are almost indistinguishable to me. He's great as Le Chiffre in Casino Royale, but he's basically been playing that character again and again and again. In Fantastic Beasts, in Doctor Strange, in every villain role that you see him in, he's playing the same kind of character. JX says he's looking for the spear from Constantine. I guess I've actually never seen Constantine, but if it's the spear of destiny, it's called the spear of Christ. It actually does have a name in this, but I forgot what they call it. But yeah, it's the spearhead that stabbed Jesus apparently during the crucifixion. During this time, the Nazis are clearing out because the liberation's coming in. Trucks up all of these and things through history that they found, because Hitler is a was a collector apparently and was looking for all of these historical artifacts. And we know that from Raiders of the Lost Ark, we hear that mentioned, and Holy Grail, where Hitler makes a cameo, which is great. So during this time, I believe I'm trying to remember back to the film, Mads Mikkelsen finds out that the spear is a fake. Now, he acquired this spear, so I don't know why all of a sudden he's brought up the fact now that it's a fake. It's like the hand alloy, and was probably made in the last 50 years or so. I'm like, well, why do you have it? Why do you have it protected in like a wooden crate? Why are you so proud of this thing? And he's trying to convince his superior in that moment that he's discovered a far more powerful artifact, which is the Dial of Destiny, which is a device made by Archimedes and is capable of discovering cracks in time, basically, portals through time. And they don't believe him, but he's convinced that this is a thing. And it comes in many pieces. Of course it does, because we can't just have it intact. We've got to go on a mission all over the globe and find all of these pieces and put the things together to make the thing. I've got to... Okay, so digital de-aging. I don't know what his take is on this. I've seen people say that it's immoral to do that, it's like unethical or something. I think that's more from resurrecting deceased actors in terms of CGI. Namely Tarkin from Rogue One, digitally Carrie Fisher, and Carrie Fisher in Episode 9 after a pass. I think if it's done well, it's fine. However, I've seen better digital de-aging in this, and there's always going to be an uncanny valley. I've actually seen a lot of people praising this opening scene, saying that it looks really convincing, but to me, like Paul Walker from Fast and Furious 7, it looked really fake and it looked really uncomfortable, and I couldn't, and it just didn't right on the, and it looked very waxy and it looked very animated and awkward to me. I think eventually the scene continues because it's a long opening scene. It goes on for about 15 minutes or so, maybe even 20. It felt like it went on for a while. I guess you got used to it, and they do open the scene. It's at night time, very darkly lit, actually, to the point where some of the action beats are actually almost in you couldn't make them out at all. They were indistinguishable on screen. And I'm guessing maybe a lot of that was to do with the fact of trying to sell this digital thing more, because broad daylight, you probably see the cracks on it a little bit more. Whereas in low lighting, you can kind of forgive really bad CGI. There's a lot of bad CGI in this bit. It ensues to this like whole elaborate train fight, and Indiana Jones is jumping on the top of the train and running along it. The first time we hear Indiana Jones there in this film is from a long shot of Indiana Jones, a CGI Indiana Jones running on top of a CGI train and bunny hopping over each cart from a distance. And it really fucking bad. Surprised me the most, but I mean, a lot of my suspicions were kind of true from the trailers that came out, which looked absolutely terrible. James Mangold said, James Mangold directed Logan, which was a very good film. A lot of people would praise it as one of the best comic book movies of all time. I don't know if I'd go that high. I do think Logan is a little bit overrated personally, although I do think it's a very good film. He said that he was making a big push for practical effects and to try and capture the aesthetics of the original Indiana Jones. The original Indiana Jones films have got some of the best stunt work out there and action choreography I've seen, because a lot of it is real. You remember the scene in, I think it's, I'm pretty sure it's in Last Crusade during the tank battle. And Indiana Jones is kind of like swung out to the side on the tank and he's holding on to the turret, driving the tank into the wall, and like he's inches from the wall. And it's like an actual actor is on there. A stunt guy is on that turret and they're pushing it into. Raiders of the Lost Ark's got some fantastic stunts as well. And it's done in camera and it's all real. Yeah, was there rear projection and stuff like that, and some pretty, ropey green screen and some bits in like Temple of Doom and things like that? Yeah, but so much of it was all in camera, and it had that rawness to it, had that bite to it. Violence in those first three Indiana Jones films. Indiana Jones fucking kills people. This one, you know, done by Disney, it's all glossy and digital, and that goes for all of the action set pieces in this film. Nothing felt real. There's so many times where the green's so bad you can clearly just tell they're on a soundstage. Nothing feels kinetic. Nothing feels real or tangible. You know, punches don't have the impact when people are crashing into things. You're not seeing a real vehicle crash into something, and you know there being a reaction to it. You're just seeing pixels on a screen. And actually, I just don't, and the movements don't really match up with things, and so much CGI in this train battle, and not once do you put, you know, Toby Jones or Harrison Ford or Mads Mikkelsen on top of this train. It's light, so you think that the effects would be good, but the green screen's really bad. The lighting and the contrast between them doesn't quite match up. It almost kind of reminds me of the long neck dinosaur stampede scene from Peter Jackson's remake of King Kong, where you could just tell the actors aren't in that scenario at all. They're not reacting well to the things that are going around them, and the lighting doesn't, and the comping doesn't really work. On top of that, you've got Ford's weird CGI face, and there's so many conveniences as well. Now I know there's been conveniences in a lot of the other Indiana Jones films. You know, you might say all the bit where they get in the rubber raft and dive out of the plane and conveniently land on the slopes of the mountain and skim down it. But hey, at least that was done in camera. With this one, Indiana Jones, they try and hang him, and they put the noose around his neck, and and the place is being bombed by the Allies at this, and a bomb comes through the ceiling and lands on the floor. Like, Indiana Jones is surrounded by Nazis, and he's being hung like he's choking to death, and this missile, this bomb, this shell just lands and doesn't blow up. And then it like awkwardly, almost like a sinkhole, sinks into the ground and goes like from deck to deck to deck, from floor to floor to floor, blows up at the bottom, annihilates the whole fucking building, takes out all the Nazis that were surrounding Indy. But Indy's fine. And there's a bit of slapstick going on where he's like dangling by the noose, and he's trying to get it out, trying to take the noose off. And it's nothing feels real. It's none of the physics really match. And anyway, I'm repeating, but the effects weren't good in this opening scene, and a lot of the scenes, but especially in this opening one. Indy acquires the dial and escaping with Toby Jones's character, who Phoebe was character's father in this. And then Mads Mikkelsen meets on top of the train, and he's like, "Oh, John," and Indy throws it. I assume the dog. Mads Mikkelsen catches it, and then there's a tunnel coming up, or like a sign, you know, ding 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 on a train. There's one of those coming up, and Toes ducks, and Indiana Jones ducks, and Mads Mikkelsen gets fucking taken out by this thing at like 1,000,000 miles an hour. He just takes this fucking sign to the face, and he's flung off the train. And I was like, that was the one moment in the film, and although it was digital, I think it was the sound effect more than anything. I went like, oh, like I was laughing. I was like, oh fuck, like he is annihilated. Now I knew that Mads Mikkelsen wasn't going to be dead, but I thought they were going to do something where right before he got hit, he turned back time, or something like that, or he has used the dial to change the course of events, and there's like a duplicate Mads Mikkelsen out there, or some, because no one can survive this. No one could survive getting smashed in the face at like however many miles an hour a train's back in those, and falling hundreds of feet by the bit off the train track. And he does survive, and he shows up later, and you know he's an older man now than he was, as you know, as is Indiana Jones when it gets to the present day, 1969. But there's no explanation of how he survived. I expected him to have some kind of like scar on his face. I like the villains of Indiana Jones, some of them have got a unique appearance to them. I thought he'd have like a massive like scar over his face or something, or want retribution, want revenge on Indiana Jones for maiming him, like scarring him, and it would be a more striking appearance to his villain. No, it's he survived somehow, and he's now working for NASA, and he's helped put man on the moon, and he's working for the US government now. So I guess they're kind of going with, oh, Nazis are in plain sight, this whole like neo-Nazi wave. But yeah, that's our intro scene. Then we cut to 1969, and we have shirtless Indiana Jones, old, miserable, in like a wife beater, and he's woken up by loud music. He's actually woken up by the Beatles song Magical Mystery Tour. And his next door neighbors are a bunch of hippies and like flower power people. He grabs a baseball bat and he's literally like, get off my lawn kind of thing. He's rapping the baseball bat on the door and he's like, turn it down. It's like early or whatever it is. Proper like old grandpa. At this time, the camera conveniently pans to the table and we see divorce paper Marion Ravenwood, and it's like, oh, well, okay, so he was married to her for like, what, 10 years, and then just, maybe just slightly over 10 years, and then got divorced, even though they were meant to have like a happy ending and they were always destined to be together, even though she was only one of 3 partners that he had during the course of the Indiana Jones trilogy. But okay, she was the one, apparently. So during this time, it's the astronauts have returned from the Apollo 11 mission, so there's parades in the street and USA's going, patriotic out the wazoo. Indiana Jones goes to his university. He gives a lecture, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge is at the back of and she's the one who studied everything and knows everything about Archimedes, because her father was obsessed over it, so she knows everything, so she goes there. I think she's just trying to scope the area out, really, for Indiana Jones, because she's got a plan, which I'll get to in a minute. Indiana Jones goes to his university, and he's given a surprise retirement party, and he's given a clock, which he promptly throws away and goes straight to the bar to drink his sorrows away. I know how he feels. And he's cornered by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who introduces herself as his goddaughter. And it's almost like a Fast and Furious movie. It's a family member that he's never mentioned, never privy to. Apparently hasn't seen her in 18 years. And obviously she's the daughter of Toby Jones's character. Let me just see. She's a treasure hunter as well. Basically, she is everything that Indiana Jones should be in this film. There's even a scene later on where she proudly proclaims, Indiana Jones says something to her like, how did you get like this? And she goes, oh, what? Courageous, dashing, intelligent, amazing, stunningly beautiful, great at everything. Like, there's literally, I'm adding a few to that list, but there is a line where she reels off like 4 character traits. And it pisses me off because I'm like, let the character speak for herself. It's almost like, I mentioned this in my previous stream. We, the audience, won't pick up on that because we fucking hate her, and she's an absolutely obnoxious character, selfish character. She just sucks the life out of every single scene that she's in this film. Easily the worst thing, and she's in so much of the film. She is inherently the main character, but she's doing all the stuff that Indiana Jones should be doing in this film. And of course, berates him for his age, puts him on, and overall thunder cunt during this whole movie. She's an absolute bitch to him, and she's just not a likable character at all. Like, I'm fine if, let's take Willie Scott's character from Temple of Doom, Kate Capshaw. She's a very selfish, self-centered character. She's the damsel in distress though, but she's very screamy. Like, some would say she's annoying. She's out for herself. But there is a connection there with Indiana Jones, and ultimately she does fulfill that damsel in distress role in the film, and that's fine. It's a nice juxtaposition from what we saw from Marion Ravenwood. Marion was all of the qualities, she was headstrong, she was tough, she was, she could think her way out of a situation. But there are elements where she does need to be rescued by Indiana Jones, but the two have real chemistry in that first film. But I think that Kate Capshaw and Harrison Ford do have chemistry in Temple of Doom as well. That scene where not both of them really want each other for a steamy night of passion, but both one is so stubborn and headstrong to admit that they want it. So she's like, 5 minutes. You'll be back in 5 minutes, and they both sleep on like opposite hotel rooms, like opposite each other, and they each really want to go to each other's hotel room for a steamy night of passion, but they're both too stubborn to do it. I love that. I love that. I really do. And it's a nice change up. And then you kind of have Elsa Snyder a little bit in the third one, and she's out for her own ends. Obviously, she's a Nazi, but there's a bit of romance there and there's chemistry there again. But in this one, obviously, you don't really have that, her being his goddaughter, but she's a self-insert character. And there were, in fact, talks to have Phoebe Waller-Bridge star in her own continuation of the Indiana Jones series. They were going to do a Disney Plus series on Phoebe Waller-Bridge being the new Indiana Jones. Right around this time, there were rumors that Indiana Jones was going to die at the end, and there was going to be a passing of the torch, and she was going to take up the hat. She was going to take up the mantle, and congratulations, Kathleen Kennedy, you got your female Indiana Jones. Right around this time, I remember they shit-canned the series. Recently, Kathleen Kennedy's kind of backpedaled on that now as well, saying, well, there's still a chance the Indiana Jones franchise could continue in some way. It's never going to. Her days are numbered at Lucasfilm, I'm sure. But yeah, like the original ending of this film, and I'll get onto this when I get to the very end, you can tell that this ending was reshot to hell and back. And speaking of reshoots, the budget for this film is astronomical. It's actually one of the most expensive movies ever made. It's sitting at a budget shy of 300 mil. That's outrageous for an Indiana Jones film. And it's not like you can even see the money on screen. The CGI in this film is awful. Just everything about it looks cheap. Compared to like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, those like really awful CGI jungle sequences where you've got Mutt Williams swinging through the trees like Tarzan with Monkey, and they're just driving through these trees, and you've got like the terrible green screen going past. That's this whole film. It all looks like that. Not even that the effects look good for the money. I don't know why this cost 300 million. None of it is probably from the reshoots. As I mentioned, this was delayed and reshot a whole bunch of times. The original ending didn't go over well with test screenings, test audiences, and I'm assuming that's the ending. Indiana Jones does die because it sets us up for that for the ending, and then there's a black, and it feels like a hastily done reshot where they have to try and wrap everything up. But since changing the ending now, right after that, they shit canned the Phoebe Waller-Bridge led in Jones. So, yeah, I'm guessing it has something to do with that. But 300 mil, and that's without advertising. With advertising, you've usually got to add about half to that, like at least half. So 150 mil on top of that. We're sitting at 450 mil now. Bearing in mind that cinemas usually take about 10% cut of the take-ins, the earnings. You're now looking at a film that just to break even needs to get about 800, 850, upwards of 900 to even break even. And this movie ain't going to make that. This is projected to have a very, very small opening weekend. I say small. I think it's projected to get about 160 mil. I think it was, which compared to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is just absolute chump change. But in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have Mission Impossible 7 coming out. We're going to have a lot of these other big films over the summer, and I think they'll just be more entertaining for people to watch in terms of this genre, the action adventure genre, and this will fall to the wayside. I think this will have a big drop off. I don't think this is going to make its money back. I think this is actually going to be a huge loss for Disney. And as I said, Kathleen Kennedy's failure will be complete. She's tanked Star Wars. Willow is an absolute laughing stock. There was the Disney Plus series full of identity and agenda politics, which has now been taken off Disney Plus in the very, very short span of time that it lived on that streaming platform. Now it's like it didn't happen. Season 2 has been cancelled and it's been taken off Disney Plus and it's been sealed in the Disney vault. You will never see that series again. And she's done it again with Indiana Jones. And again, like, I can't be too mad about this one because my expectations were already buried beneath the Earth's fucking core. But a lot of the damage was already done with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So I've just kind of tuned myself out to any more Indiana Jones stuff. So let's continue this anyway. So Phoebe Waller-Bridge collars Indiana Jones at the bar after his retirement. And he explains to her that the dial has been split into 3 parts and that her father was driven to the brink of insanity while attempting to unlock its secrets, which is very strange why he's telling her that, because she grew up with her father, so she knows that it was driving him crazy. So it's telling it's telling the audience for our benefit, but Phoebe Waller-Bridge knows this because she grew up in that household. So why does she need to be told this? And Indiana Jones, in a flashback, he takes control of that artifact. So the first part of the artifact is in the university, and when they're retrieving it, they're attacked by Mads Mikkelsen, and that's get used to that because that happens all the way throughout this movie. They go somewhere, Mads Mikkelsen shows up. 5 minutes later, they go somewhere else. You think you're gonna have a bit of a reprieve? Oh no, Mads Mikkelsen's already there, and it's that for 2.5 hours. So they're attacked by Mikkelsen, and a lot of his lackeys, a lot of his sort of like the supporting villains in this film, his henchmen, they kill a couple of the co-professors at the university. Indiana Jones manages to flee, and he is framed for the murder of these 2 colleagues, which feels very weird to me. I don't know why they would automatically suspect him. I don't know when CCTV came into the picture, but do they have cameras on site? If they don't, then just to go, oh, Indy did it. I guess he fled the scene of the crime, I suppose, but he was the one who made the call to get the police there in the first place and said, like, hey, there's been a murder. And, there's weird, creepy German people walking around acting really shifty with guns. Like, maybe it's them. But Jones escapes on horseback, and that's the bit that you see in the trailers. But he's like charging down New York subway systems on a fucking horse, and there's a train coming towards him, and he just manages to veer off. And it's all CGI and it's all rear screen projection, and it just looks terrible because that half of this stuff's physically impossible. So we've got to put it in a computer, but because of that, it doesn't feel real, and that's one of the one of the biggest positives of the Indiana Jones trilogy is that so many of those stunts were done in camera, and there's power behind the punches and the set pieces. Not so much in this one. Right after he escapes, we get introduced to John Rhys-Davies' character. Sala's back. Is it good seeing John Rhys-Davies? Yeah, he's great. He's a great actor. He's a tremendous talent. Really nice guy as well. Met him a couple of times at Comic-Con. Really, really down-to-earth guy and always good for a laugh. So it's cool seeing Sala again, and it's a bit of fan service in there, I suppose, bringing his character back. It's weird that they never brought Jim Broadbent's character back from Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, because he did express interest in coming back for it, and I don't know, I guess there just wasn't a place for him in the film. But then again, he talks about his retirement in Indiana Jones 4, doesn't he? And there's that one of the nicest scenes actually in that, where he says that we've started to reach the age where life stops giving us things and starts taking them away. And there's a nice scene where we see the picture of Sean Connery on his desk. I really like that scene. That was one scene from that film that I actually didn't hate. So with Indiana Jones retiring in this one, I could see a scene where he goes, even if it's just one scene with Jim Broadbent's character, but it feels like they just want to, and I don't blame them for this, I suppose. They just want to dismantle and get rid of everything that Indiana Jones 4 set up. But the fact that they do reference it anyway makes it very weird that it is a continuation, because it just doesn't really continue anything from how Indy 4 ended. Mutt's dead and Indiana Jones is is divorced. So great. Mm. Um, Indiana Jones says that he's going to fly to Tangier, where Helena has taken the piece of the artifact that she stole from him, and she's going to sell it to the highest bidder at this bar that sells stolen antiquities. I don't know how this is like a well-known thing. This is just a place that people are aware that stolen artifacts are sold at, so I don't know why it hasn't been shut down at this point. But there you go. So Jones goes there, and we're introduced to our child sidekick of the movie, who's kind of our short round stand-in. I will say, by the way, for anyone getting their hopes up that they might see short round in this film, he's not in it. And it's actually kind of funny because the actor has now since won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and he was great in that film. And it would have been nice to have seen Short Round together with Indiana Jones, have them be the leads. That, you know, that guy does action scenes in Everything Everywhere All at Once. He could have done that. He could have been the muscle. It would have been a real. I don't know. I would have loved to have seen Short Round back in these films again, but when this was being filmed, he wasn't big. Everything Everywhere was his return to acting. I guess the only chance we're going to see Short Round reuniting with Indiana Jones is when he hugged him on stage during the Oscars, which was a really nice moment. But yeah, it's a shame he's not in this, but we get a character of Teddy Kumar, who is terrible, forgettable, unlikable, not charismatic, not funny, not anything. He is just there with Phoebe Waller-Bridge. So you got all these people voting for it, and Mads Mikkelsen shows up. He just knows that she's going to be there. Well, I think it was arranged. I think he'd arranged to. No, did he arrange to buy it? I can't even remember now. He says that this is my property. I'm just claiming it. So I don't know how he knows that she's heading there, or if she tipped him off that, oh, I'm going to be at an auction. But anyway, Indiana Jones gets the thing, as fight ensues, and they get in these rickshaw things, and there's a really overly long auto rickshaw car chase throughout the streets. And again, you've got terrible. They actually released a clip of this. This was one of the first clips I saw of this film. And it's really bad rear screen projection. And, you know, Indiana Jones is doing all of this shit that you know he's not doing. Phoebe Waller-Bridge is just doing all of the capable stuff that Indiana Jones should be doing. You know, if Indiana Jones was in his prime. And she's just an unlikable cunt. Like, everything she's saying, every line of dialogue is just a smarmy, self-centered line, or berating Indiana Jones for his age, his ability, what he's done, just tearing the character down, and it's just unrelenting. It's just, yeah, it just feels really mean-spirited. It feels just really meta from like Kathleen Kennedy's standpoint, that she's just letting out all this like vitriol and hate towards this character through the lens of Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I just don't think her acting's that good either. I don't like her line delivery. I don't like her mannerisms, and yeah, she's just an absolutely atrocious character. And I'm not sure if she always plays characters like that, or if this character is distinctly different from anything she's done before. As I've mentioned, I've only really seen Phoebe Waller-Bridge in this one. You know, she's all about. Yeah, there's another bit as well during this chase scene. I guess it's like meant to be awkward comedy, but it shows that Helena's been a bit of a like. She's slept around. She's been a bit of a whore for her own agenda. This guy rocks up, and he's like, "Helena, come back with me. I loved you. Do you still have the ring?" And the dude's like crying. The dude's like a complete simp and like emasculated, and he's crying over her. He's like, "Oh, you're the best woman I ever had. Like, I loved you. You know, you're so beautiful." And I'm like, "Are you?" I mean, maybe it's just me. I don't think Phoebe Waller-Bridge is all that much to look at, but that's just me personally. And she's gloating over the fact that she's destroyed this man's life, that she's just used him for his money to finance her own ends, and then she's just like took off. And we're meant to like this character, we're meant to root for her later, and this guy is just like fucking broken. It's like, hey, welcome to like, modern Yas Queen. Let's go get it, girl, kind of thing. It's just so mean spirited. But that's fucking Hollywood for you, isn't it? They live for this shit. So Indiana Jones convinces Helena not to sell the item, and that it's more important. It's actually interesting to me that she just wants money. She just wants to sell it for money. There's no, but then we also know that she's also really obsessed over this, and she's kind of dedicated her life to studying her father's notebooks and memorizing her father's notebooks and all the stuff to do with Archimedes and the dial and its capabilities, and she's fascinated by this stuff. And pretty much like how Sean Connery dedicated his life to finding the Holy Grail, this is like her Holy Grail, essentially, is this dial of Archimedes. But yeah, she gets a piece of it, and she just wants to sell it. She just wants to sell these items. She doesn't care about them. And then Indiana Jones is like, oh yeah, I need to remind you that this is important. And then she's like, oh yeah, and agrees not to sell it. After this point, they journey to Greece, where they meet Antonio Banderas' character called Ronaldo, who's actually quite a cool supporting character. I'd like to have seen more of him, but we don't really get much of him in the film. Who's an expert deep sea diver, and they find out that the second piece that they need is buried beneath the waves, so many miles deep, and they need his help for the equipment to get under there and deep sea dive. It's at this point in the film where what's his name? Indiana Jones. Sorry, it's really late. Phoebe Waller-Bridge asks him, "Oh yeah, if you got the dial of destiny and you could turn back time, what would you do? Would you go back? Would you go back and like hook up with Cleopatra, or would you go back and see the Trojan War or something?" And he says, "I would have convinced my son. I would have told him not to go to war." And she says, "Oh, did he do it to try and do it for your approval?" And he says, "No, he did it because." I forgot what he said, because like he wanted to, or like he was misguided or something. And he says like I would have told him that he was going to die, and then he just kind of breaks down, and his voice is cracking, and he says like, and then I would have been filled with guilt, and then Marion wouldn't have left me, and blah 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 blah. I'm like, wow, we've just completely ruined this character and the genuine like father and son story that we had in Indiana Jones 4. As I say, Kid of the Crystal Skulls just may as well not have existed, which is probably a good thing, but this film should also not exist. It's also very, very bad and boring and dull and overly long, and there's a Phoebe Waller-Bridge in here, which is like the biggest problem with the film. And again, even Blade Runner 2049, I think, I mean, I've only seen that film once, but he's like a deadbeat dad in that one as well, isn't he? And, he's broken up with Rachel, and he's just miserable, and he's a drunk. And I guess that fits more with Blade Runner because it's noir, and I guess that fits into his character. But there's a pattern with all of these resurrected roles of Harrison Ford returning to some of these characters. So they travel down into the Aegean Sea to retrieve the second part, and they get attacked by eels. And there's a line in the movie where they go down. They say like, "Oh, there's eels in there," and the little short round type kid is teasing Indiana Jones, and he goes, "Oh, like snakes, and you don't like snakes, and you're scared." And he's, "Oh, well, what are you afraid of?" And the kid's like, "Oh, I can't swim. I'm scared of the water. I can't swim." Bear that in mind later, because all of a sudden this kid can just swim. he's just put in that situation, and he can. And the kid can also fly a plane with no knowledge of knowing how to fly a plane, because we need it for the plot, I guess. And he needs to be present during the final action scene, despite the fact that he really accomplishes nothing. Like the short round kid at the end, he's tagging along for the action, but he really doesn't do anything. He doesn't help. At least with short round snaps Indiana Jones out of his, his when he's possessed, when he's drank the blood of the Kali and he goes a bit nuts. Short Round breaks him out of it. And, he helps. He's the getaway driver. He gets him out of the situations. There's some nice, character scenes and conversations with him and Indiana Jones. You really believe there's that bond there between them. You don't get anything with this one. Right around this time, Mads Mikkelsen shows up again, and he's found exactly where they are. I don't know how he found out where they are, but he found them, and he's there. He kills Ronaldo, shoots him, and he's got the second artifact now. And he forces Phoebe Waller-Bridge to translate what's on this panel, and she translates what's on this thing for him. But she's got a stick of dynamite in her back pocket, and she's kind of stalling for time a little bit. She divulges all the information to him, and then Indiana Jones lights the dynamite in the back of her trousers. She throws it, blows everything up, apart from the plot-centric characters, and all of them get out of there. And they discover that the third and final part of the dial is at the grave of Archimedes. And they sort of gave Mads Mikkelsen false information, I suppose. They told him what it translated out to, but then she'd left out a part of it or something. But it's all pointless, because it's not like there's any kind of misdirection, because they find out the true whereabouts of it, and they start veering west instead of east. And he's 2 minutes away on the boat, and he's just got his binoculars out watching them, and he sees that they've changed course, so he just follows them. So he's right on their tail the whole way. So they get the third part of the dial, and they reassemble it. They board a plane. Let me just see. Oh no, sorry. Again, at this point, because he was right on their tail, Mads Mikkelsen shows up again and just takes the third part. This is what happens all the way through the film. He's just there. He's just there. And he takes the third part. He reassembles it, and he boards a plane. And he and his cronies don SS uniforms, because they're neo-Nazis. And what his plan is that he knows that there's going to be a rift in space and time that's going to open up, and he's worked the calculations out that these coordinates will take them to 1939, and his plan is to go through this crack in time, kill Adolf Hitler, so that a new leader can be put in charge of Germany, so Germany can win the war. He blames the loss on the mismanagement and the terrible leadership of Adolf Hitler. Now, I don't know whether it's implied that he himself wants to be the ruler and he wants to be that one that's going to lead Germany to victory. Because if he kills Hitler, the German army essentially has no leader still. They've cut the head off the snake, as it were. So how long does it take to appoint a new head of the snake during a situation like that? But yeah, he wants Hitler to die, so that at the beginning of the war, so that a new leader can hopefully do better. But this time travel device, I guess it takes you to one fixed point. It's not like a time turner or something from Harry Potter. Sorry. I really need to finish this before this stream, don't I? However, on their way through this rift, they're counting down. They're like 10, 9, 8. And Indiana Jones chimes up and he says, hey, one thing. Your coordinates are wrong, because you haven't taken into account I think he says continental drift. He hasn't taken that into consideration, because of the geographical locations over time. And Mads Mikkelsen's kind of going, fuck, yeah, no, I didn't. And this dude is super smart, and he's working for NASA and stuff like that. And these didn't play into his calculations at all. It's so strange. And instead of so they go through this portal, and they've gone through a rift in time, and they've gone somewhere else. And the short round kid is piloting a plane, and he's just following them because he's one of the characters and he needs to be there, apparently. They wind up in 212 BC during this big, it's where Archimedes is, and there's a big fight, there's a big siege with the Romans attacking them. So the battle of the Nazis, and it's digital as hell, and it's CGI filled as fuck, and it looks really glossy and overly bright and shiny. And you got all these warships, and they're firing ballista bolts into the sky, and they see these airplanes from the future, and they call them dragons, and they're firing like harpoons at them and everything. Most of them get taken out, the engines get cut out, and they start crashing towards the ground. That's the scene from the trailer where you see where Phoebe Waller-Bridge is like, "I'm saving your life," and they dive out of the plane together. Mads Mikkelsen and the rest of them just crash into the ground, and they're dead. It's just like Mads Mikkelsen is just a really... Think of the villains in Indiana Jones, right? You've got really interesting and memorable villains. You've got the creepy Nazi guy from the first one, with the face melting, right? You've got him. You've got Belloc as well. In the second one, you've got the Kalima Shakti Day, Molaram. Fucking great. In the third one, you've got Julian Glover's character in that, you got Elsa Snyder. Really, like just good villains, I suppose. Maybe the third one's not as colourful as the other two, but still quite memorable. And then Irina Spalkov, or whatever she was called, Kate Blanchett, looked hot as hell in that jumpsuit. And I love Kate Blanchett, but just her character wasn't really imposing or menacing. And I think that's what it is. It's just, you had the Nazi officer guy in the third one. And this is how we say goodbye in Germany, Dr. Jones. He was great. He was kind of imposing and a bit creepy. And you just don't get that with Mads Mikkelsen. He just lacks any kind of the intensity or the scary quality to him. He doesn't really... Like, he shoots a couple of guys in the film, but it's like, oh, okay. He just lacks that screen presence. It's just that the villains just... again, it's just like, oh, okay, we've got to do Nazis again, haven't we? And it feels like that uninspired idea about we're having to go back. I actually didn't mind the Russians being the villains in Indiana Jones 4. It made sense for the time period, and they filled like a similar kind of role within that film, I suppose. But I guess it's like the 70s now, and it's like, shit, like, do we do the Russians again? But it's like, no, let's go back to Nazis. And it kind of feels like what they did with the Star Wars sequel trilogy, is that we've got to reset the equilibrium. Oh, we've got to have a new empire. We call them the First Order, but they're the Empire. We've got to have Star Wars. We've got to have TIE. We've got to have stormtroopers. We've got to have everything. We've got to have another Death Star. We've got to have all of this iconography and stuff that you remember from the originals, and it feels a little bit like that with this, and it's like, oh shit, well, how do we do Nazis? Oh, well, let's use a time travel device, and let's have it be about neo-Nazis. So yeah, anyway, right before this point, I should have mentioned Indiana Jones is shot, and it looks like it's he's mortally wounded, like he's bleeding quite a lot, he's bleeding out. They parachute down to the ground, and they find Archimedes, and they have a bit of a conversation with him, and they're from 2000 year future. And Archimedes hands the dial and the wristwatch back to Indiana Jones. But later on, when they go to Archimedes' tomb, he's wearing a watch. So I'm guessing he kept the watch. I don't know. On his tomb, there's propeller, and then they find the skeleton wristwatch in there. But then later on in the film, he has the complete dial and the wristwatch. Phoebe Waller-Bridge is like, no, we need to have those. He needs to make his own dial. So I don't know if he made his own watch, if that's implied as, but I always thought it was that he kept the watch. I don't know. Anyway, this gets to our reshot ending. So Indiana Jones is shot, And she's like, "Come on, we need to get to the plane. We need to get out of here. The rift is closing back up, and we'll be trapped here. We need to fly back through before it closes for good." And Indiana Jones is like, "No, just leave me here to die. I've got nothing to live for. I'm a broken man. I've nothing to go back to. I've got no wife. I've got no son. I've got no job. I've got no respects anymore. I'm fucking 80. Just let me stay here. All my life I've been researching this event in history. Now I'm here and I'm living history. And just let me have my last moments here to die in peace." And she's like, "No, I'm going to get you back on the plane." He's like, "Just let me fucking die." He's like me. He's just like, "I'll let this over with." And she goes, "Okay, I didn't want to do this, but I'm going to have to." And she punches him in the face, and it cuts to black. And then we wake up, like Indiana Jones is back in his apartment in Manhattan, and Helena's there. And he's like, "You should have left me there to die." And she's like, "No, you be here. You need to be here." Because the original ending of this ending, test audiences were really pissed off about it. Again, Kathleen's great rewriting of history here for hashtag girl power, hashtag the force is female. Indiana Jones was going to die and Phoebe Waller was going to pick up the hat, and she was going to go through the rest of time, which basically him dying in the past completely voids Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, like the entire franchise. He was going to pick up the hat, and she was going to live adventures as Helena Indiana Jones, basically. Which, when they announced the Disney series they were going to do with Phoebe Indiana Jones, that would have played into that, of her going on all these adventures, and Indiana Jones would have died in 212 BC. Test audiences really like that, so she punches him in the face, cut mechanism, and it just feels like a really quick last minute wrap up at the end of the film. So Helena's there. Sala's there with his Guldrum. He sings that song. Was it British heart is a soaring soul, or whatever he sings in Raiders of the Lost Ark. He sings that again. And then Marion shows back up. She's back in it. So, Karen Allen, I suppose it was good to her again. And she returns, and she's presumably cancelled her plans to divorce Indiana Jones. And there's a moment where both of them reconcile. And I suppose it's a nice little callback to Raiders of the Lost Ark. That bit where they're in the tent, and she's like, "Does it hurt?" And he's like, "Here." And she kisses it, and he goes, and here. And here, and then the two share a kiss. So they recreate that moment, but the roles are reversed. After that, we see Helena get into a car, and then the final shot, it pans up to the balcony in Indy's apartment, and he's got his hat hung on the washing line. And then we do that, was it like the fisheye thing, is it, where Mandalorian season 3 ended like this, where it goes, "That's all, folks," kind of thing, and it focuses on the hat, and then Indy's hand just comes in and grabs the hat, and we cut to black. I don't know if that's implying that he will then go more adventures, or maybe his newfound passion for Marion Ravenwood, he just wanted the hat on something. I don't know, but that's how it ends. And John Williams' score as well. Now, I can't be too hard on the guy, right? John Williams is a genius, is easily the greatest film composers, if the greatest film composer of all time. The dude's the one. He went on record saying that this will be his last film score and he's going to retire after this. But then I think a few months after that, he went back on that, as he's just going to continue to work. But the music in this film is so uninspired, and you just don't really notice it. Those first 3 Indiana films have so many memorable themes across the trilogy. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull didn't really have a particularly memorable score. I remember coming out of that film thinking like, "Oh, the music's kind of forgettable, doesn't really have any distinguishable themes." And it's kind of the same with it. I know that he did a Helena theme, but it's never brought to the forefront, and it's never repeated enough throughout the film to really pay any attention to it. Another thing that kind of annoyed me as well was the end credits music, because yes, I did see end credits, and yes, they are long. All of the other Indiana Jones films did, with the big row fanfare at the very end of the credits, similar to how the Star Wars end credits do. They always with like the same bit of music at the very, very end of the credits, as far as I'm aware. Apart from Phantom Menace, actually, now I come to think of it. Anyway, certainly the original trilogy. It segues back into the Raiders March, and it just ends with like da 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 da. Like all the credits have ended with that, but not this one. It just ends with like a meandering, miserable bit of music. It's just, honestly, it's so nondescript. The music in this film, it really is. The flashy direction from James Mangold, the CGI is all the way through. The bit where Indiana Jones gets attacked by CGI eels in the film, it just feels like Disney leftover effects left over from The Little Mermaid, or they were working on both of them at the same time and just threw them in. There's never any moment where anything feels real. You don't believe they're underwater. You don't believe that there's eels there, because there's like hundreds of murderous fucking eels that start attacking Indiana Jones. They're all CGI, and it looks like something out of, as I say, The Little Mermaid or Aquaman or something. The train sequence beginning is so fakey fake, and not, you know, down to the uncanny valley on space, de-aging, which doesn't look that great, but just the green screen and the light and the CGI. There's a moment where Phoebe Waller-Bridge is trying to this plane that's taking off, and she's on like a little fucking tricycle. I'm like, what are the speeds of vehicles here? Apparently, three wheel like rickshaw things in Tangier can catch up with 4-wheel drive and can drive insanely and can like outrun cars and shit. But she's on this little tricycle thing, and she catches up with a speeding plane as it's taking off, and the CGI rain just looks so bad, and you know the acting isn't great. Phoebe Waller-Bridge is just intolerable. I'm so tired. Intolerable, hateful, spiteful, selfish, miserable, bitter. Who's Indiana Jones down every single chance that she gets. Mads Mikkelsen is a serviceable villain, but the villain isn't really given much to do. He doesn't really have much, you know, intimidating impact. There's always the moment as well in these films where Indiana Jones fights the grunt. There's always like a big, stocky henchman he fights. And there is a stocky henchman in this. The dude's like 7 foot tall, and he's built like a brick shithouse. But Indiana Jones never fights him once in this film, which I can kind of understand, because, you know, put a world weight heavyweight champion boxer against an 80-year-old Indiana Jones, and Indiana Jones is dead. He's going to break every bone in his body. But yeah, like all the stunts, you know that an 80-year-old wouldn't do that. It's just past it. It's Indiana Jones is an archetype and is a character that should be in his prime. You don't want to see aged adventurer that's miserable, wants to die, can't keep up. He's going to get a broken hip by just running at a brisk pace. It's just disheartening to watch, and you don't want to see that, because that just goes against the whole antithesis character. And Phoebe Waller-Bridge is the Kathleen Kennedy stand-in. She is, you know, tears down the male masculine archetype, bigs herself up, you know, I'm beautiful, dashing, I'm witty, I'm daring. She's the one sleeping around to get her own agenda and to get her own way. An overly masculine character, and yeah, the film focuses on her, really. So many scenes are with her doing all of this stuff that Indiana Jones should be doing. There's loads of scenes where she's standing in the foreground and he's just in the background. It's just it's just tired. It's just tired. Honestly, if you said to me which is better, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull or this one, I honestly don't know at this point. I really don't know. This one, apart from the time travel shit, which is just awful and terrible, This feels more grounded than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. There's no rocket car, there's no aliens, there's no UFO, there's no swinging in the trees with CGI monkeys or CGI gophers. There's no moment where an atom bomb's about to be dropped and Indiana Jones gets in a fridge and is looking at a cloud. There's none of that. There's no moments where they go over 3 waterfalls in a car and live, or natives that have been hung in a wall for however long and have like paved themselves into the wall to spring out for unsuspecting us. There's nothing like that in this film, but I can see at least where I see what Kingdom of the Crystal was based. I could see the ideas that George Lucas had, misguided as they may have been, but I could see he was trying to base them on his films. Even the Star Wars prequels, especially the original trilogy and Indiana Jones, are all based on stuff that George Lucas grew up with and cinema that he was interested in, serials and pulp TV shows and things like you can trace, entire shots, cinematography, staging, and dialogue types and everything to all of those films that you grew up and thing to look at. Whereas one doesn't really have that. It's not based on anything. And you're going to get that with a lot of projects now. These old school directors, these films that came out in the 80s, and before 70s or whatnot, they were all based on something. Whereas now we're making this not we're going to do a modern day adaptation of a B movie franchise or this adventure serial or anything like that. We're just going to make a new Indiana Jones film because it's IP and it's something from Lucas we haven't ran into the ground yet. Have now. And it felt like, that's a recognizable, we're going to make that, rather than it's a recognizable name and we're going to make a sequel, but this is what we're visually going to base it on and this is going to be our inspiration for it. Their inspiration was money, and it's hilarious because they're not going to make that money back. I guarantee. I will put money on it. I won't put 300 on it, which is how much Disney spent on this film, which is absolutely egregious. There is no way that this film needs to be 154 minutes at a 300 mil budget. You don't see that budget on screen at all. And the runs feel every bit of the time. It's needlessly. You're very aware of this. When you're watching this film, you're very aware that this has got 4 screenwriters. As has been, page 1 rewrites. It's been passed from pillar to post. Ideas drafted in, an input on it. People dropping out of the project. Directors dropping out of the project. And I just get that, Steven Spielberg was originally attached, but you could tell his heart. You could even tell his heart wasn't really in it with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. To be honest, even there's interviews with him from that film saying that he didn't even want to do it. They finished Indiana Jones in 1989. Indiana Jones had his final scene riding into the sunset, which to me is still and the definitive ending to Indiana Jones. Again, as I say, the DVD box set doesn't lie. Complete Adventures of Indiana Jones, and it's a goddamn trilogy, and it's a beautiful set. Yeah, I don't even know if this counts as a rant, really, because I'm numb to it. Everything from Lucasfilm, everything Disney are putting out, everything Disney. It's sad to see how far this company has fallen in terms of the products they're putting out there. The originality is gone, the spark is gone, and it's systemic at this point. It's systemic. For Disney to change, they need a shakeup. They need a complete shakeup from the producers and the higher ups and the CEOs and whatnot. Disney needs to be ripped out, root, twig, and stem. If that's the expression, it's like a weed. It needs to be ripped out, and there needs to be new blood put in there that are focused on creative storytelling, originality, and not identity politics and pushing their own agenda films, and just make quality entertainment is what Disney used to be about. And our modern films now that don't preach and don't pander and don't tick all these boxes to be in a film. And they make a lot of fucking money. And guess what? The shit that is agenda politics and it's run the nose with it, and it's forcing it into it, guess what? They're not making money and they're losing millions, and it's great to see. One thing I did want to mention about Shia LaBeouf, though, because the guy is an absolute nutcase, and I know there's been, I believe there's been like allegations thrown at him, which I'm not even true or not, because I haven't read into it. I just reading all of, but I know he'd had like weird, unhinged moments and stuff like that, and I pretty much in Hollywood now, you could have recast mums, and you could have father and sons. 15 years have passed, and could recast Williams, I'm pretty sure, with someone else. It's just amazing that we can't have Shia LaBeouf in this film, but we can have Ezra Miller's in The Flash. Now, granted, that film's losing money, hand over fist. Is brilliant to watch. It's amazing to see projects that these studios have poured hundreds of millions into, with all of the, bullshit politics and stuff like that, and shady goings on, to not get financially rewarded from it. But the point still stands. Ezra Miller is in a big budget blockbuster film out at the cinemas right now, but then others won't be in there. So I don't know. It's this weird double standard in Hollywood at the moment. But one thing I do know is Warner Brothers are losing a lot of money, and Disney are losing a lot of money too. We've got Elemental coming out next, which is the big Pixar film, or big Pixar film, and it's made like absolutely nothing in the States, and is projected to be and I don't know why I know why I'm happy about this, because if you play stupid games, you get stupid fucking prizes, and Disney have been playing a stupid game since like 2015. It's going to be very interesting. Losing millions of subscribers on Disney Plus, hundreds of millions constantly. The last 3 Pixar films have like all flopped. You had Onward, flopped, Lightyear, which flopped, and now Elemental's going to flop as well. This is if you go back to the again of Pixar, Toy Story, Bugs Life, Toy Story 2, Finding Nemo, Monsters Inc., Incredible. They were just making all of these films. WALL-E, Ratatouille, all of these really creative, original films that they're putting out. And yeah, I mean, Elemental, everything I've seen from Elemental, I mean, I don't really have any fucking opinions on it. I'd be seeing it, but it just looks like Inside Out. It just looks like Inside Out with a slightly fresh coat of paint. Oh, instead of emotions, we're going to have elements. But all the characters kind of look the same, and it looks like the same. It looks so generic and uninspired, so that's why I won't be seeing it. But it's going to be very interesting. And of course, you've got the writer's strike still going on at the moment. I think they're like 50 to that now, maybe coming with rumors of Christmas, which is having a devastating impact on at the moment. No new stuff's being made. No, it can't be made because of the writing. It's being pushed back, shifted round. Projects have been made. There's rumors of a potential strike that may or may not happen. Well, but no one's talking about this. No one seems to give a shit about it. But yeah, okay. Cycling it back to Indiana Jones. If I was going to give positive about the whole film and everything about it, the poster does kind of ape off that sort of Drew Struzan type of design. I really like the design of the poster. It kind of matches with everything else. The one thing that I don't like, though, and I'm going to bring up my thumbnail really quick, the title, that is actually so they fucked up the color screen. They fucked up the color dynamic of the main title. I've done the correct one for Chris Rants. That's the Indiana Jones one. I don't know what the fuck that sorry excuse is for the Indiana Jones font for the Dial of Destiny, but there you go. Fuck that up. Fuck that up. Fuck the film up. I'm done. It's final nail in the coffin for Lucasfilm. The damage was done with Star Wars. They've just completely tanked that IP. Willow was dead on arrival, but that's gone. And Disney have even realized how shit it was and pulled it off their own streaming service. And now Indiana Jones. There we go. So the circle is now complete, I guess. The utter dismantling of George Lucas's work and, Steven Spielberg's work as well. But again, I can be mad on this film, but I'm just kind of apathetic towards it. but a lot of that, the damage was already done from Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So Steven Spielberg and George Lucas don't get out of this scot-free, because they did make a terrible fucking movie with Indiana Jones 4. And it's always going to be a trilogy to me. And you know what? This is, if anything, this has made me want to go back and watch Raiders. It's Red Letter Media recently did a review on Temple of Doom, which was fucking great. And I really want to watch Temple of Doom again. Everyone shits on that film, by the way. Temple of Doom is one of my favorites. I can honestly say I've watched Temple of Doom way more than I've watched Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'll concede that Raiders of the Lost Ark is a better movie, but which one's more entertaining and which I have more fun watching, and which one have I watched more times than Raiders? It's Temple of Doom. But I think my favorite is Last Crusade. And I did actually put it to a vote on my YouTube channel, which is actually a really good jumping off point. If you like what you've seen, please do consider subscribing for more movie reviews, discussions, and live streams. The next movie I will be talking about, I believe, is going to be Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 or Mission Impossible 7. That is my most anticipated movie of the year. I really hope it's good. Tom Cruise is on a roll at the moment after Top Gun Maverick, and I think it's going to do incredibly well from the success of that movie. And possible films just keep better and better as they keep going along. So yeah, please do subscribe. If you have seen Indiana Jones, please do let me know what you think of The Dial of Destiny. Did you love it? Did you hate it? You just kind of meh about it? Anything about Indiana Jones, love to hear. Let me know your favorite Indiana Jones movie, favorite Indiana Jones and stuff like that. I'm going to very, very briefly just check the final community vote was. Okay, so it was a total of 6 votes. 67% voted for The Last Aid, and 33 of you have voted for Lost Ark. No one's voted for Temple of Doom. And I didn't even put Kingdom of the Crystal Skull on there because that's going to be no one's favorite Indiana Jones movie. I'd say Last Crusade's probably my favorite. Well, just the dynamic and the comedy between Sean Connery and Harrison Ford is just absolutely wonderful. The score's beautiful, and very, very poignant and wonderful final shot of riding into the sunset, which is where Indiana Jones ended. That's where the franchise ended. I do have Twitter as well, which is going at the bottom of the screen. I'm not very active on there now. I'm mostly active on the community page on YouTube. So best place to do is just subscribe to the channel. And yeah, as we keep bringing out more content, when these big films comes out or when there's something I want to talk about, like the background and the bedspread, I do want to try and get to more Lord of the Rings content in the future. I've actually messaged Everything in Middle-earth once again, to check in on him, see how he's doing, and both of us have said that we'd like to join forces again on another Tolkien related video, so do check out for that in the future. And on the topic of Disney, I will be doing a big retrospective which will begin in October, so I'll have more details on that as we get towards sort of like the back end of August, but I'm very much looking forward to that one. And yeah, there'll be other stuff. There's other stuff I've got planned too, so yeah. It is very late. I've been going for half. It is 20 to 2 in the AM, and I'm very tired. I'm very hungry. So I'm going to bid you all a very good night, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Cheers.